Syria's interim president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, has lasted 1 year in power. But can he transform the country after decades of dictatorship and 13 years of war? For now, Sharaa is still enjoying his honeymoon period. Celebrating the first anniversary of Assad's overthrow, Syrians took to the streets in such large numbers that security forces had to turn people away for their own safety. Most are optimistic about the country's future. 70 to 80% of Syrians are confident in Sharaa, the national government, and the army, and think that his policies will be better for Syria than Assad's. But that support isn't shared equally across the country.
If you talk to Syria's minorities, and not just minorities, but secular liberal Syrians, pro-democracy and pro-human rights, they're all very concerned about the lack of inclusion in the process, very concerned about the checks and balances.
Earlier this year, an attempted uprising by pro-Assad loyalists in March and clashes in July ended in sectarian massacres by government-aligned forces. Since then, Syria's Alawite and Druze communities have grown extremely wary of their new government. In minority-dominated cities like Latakia, Tartus, and Sueda, only 36% of people have confidence in their president and government, and just 22% trust the army. Despite Sharaa verbally condemning the violence, its perpetrators haven't been brought to justice, and these communities still feel unsafe. Between ongoing revenge killings and dozens of reports of kidnappings of Alawite women, just 16% of those polled believe they have the freedom to gather publicly.
Many Syrians still feel that they're not part of this transition, and I think that needs to be addressed as soon as possible. The more time passes, the more they're not going to be able to win over these communities. So I think now is the time for them to try to find a formula to reconcile former communities that have been ravaged by the war and that they still feel insecure about this process.
In late November, protests erupted along Syria's coast, demanding more autonomy and the release of detainees and abducted women. Seizing on this unrest, Assad's former allies are trying to position themselves as the protectors of the Alawite community to regain power in the country. Former intelligence chief Kamal al-Hassan and business tycoon Rami Makhlouf have spent millions of dollars in rival efforts to train Alawite militias to fight the new government, according to a Reuters investigation. These efforts to mount an insurgency have largely failed, but it is still doubtful that Syria's Alawite, Druze, and Kurdish populations will want to lay down weapons and integrate into a national army anytime soon, meaning future disputes over authority could escalate into bloodshed once again. This violence is partly the outcome of Syria's incomplete transition process. Trying to ensure a bloodless overthrow, Sharaa's forces offered many Assad officials amnesty, but nearly 40% of Syrians think the wartime suffering of the country's Sunni majority deserves more acknowledgement, and almost 80% want the government to collect weapons from armed groups and individuals, something it might not be ready to do since it's still trying to transform its armed forces from rebel fighters into a professional military. While deploying the most disciplined units to Damascus has reassured outside observers, it has also left less disciplined forces to respond to sectarian clashes in other cities, often escalating the violence and resulting in atrocities. Without state order, people are taking justice into their own hands, leading to cycles of revenge in the form of abductions, killings, and house seizures that only deepen sectarian mistrust. These have worsened as Syrians grow impatient for economic change. Just 17% say they're happy with the country's economic performance, citing high prices and few jobs. Food insecurity is widespread, and many still complain of shortages of electricity, water, housing, and healthcare. All of this has increased the appeal of organized violence. But still, things are looking up. Sharaa's successful outreach to the US and the Gulf states has brought strong diplomatic support and promises of investment, though these are yet to be delivered.
So if you look at the diplomatic front in terms of their foreign relations, they've been able to break decades of isolation on the country. They've been able to remove almost all sanctions. They've really exceeded everyone's expectations. The way they've been able to neutralize Russia and China, a lot of Arab countries who are very skeptical of them. The way that they've been able to win over President Trump, for instance, is remarkable, and I think it's been vital for this transition.
And the US has now moved to repeal the Caesar Act, which imposed the toughest sanctions on Syria under Assad's rule, helping to boost investor confidence. Foreign firms are now exploring deals over Syria's energy reserves and coastal ports. Above all, investors want stability, but Israel's actions in the country's south suggest that Syria may be headed for the opposite.
I think the biggest single challenge the country's facing today is Israel. Israel has been very quick to act militarily militarily against Syria since the fall of Assad, and it is something that is incredibly alarming, not just for Syria but for the entire region, because everyone is concerned about a renewed Israeli escalation against the country that could potentially derail the transition entirely.
Shortly after Assad fell, Israel's military occupied a UN buffer zone in southwest Syria and conducted hundreds of airstrikes across the country, destroying around 80% of the Syrian army's strategic capabilities. Despite Shara's diplomatic outreach, Israel's government has refused to withdraw from the additional territory occupied last December, stalling any progress on a security deal. Instead, the Israeli military carried out several airstrikes and ground raids on southern Syrian villages since then, killing and injuring dozens of people. While Israel's government has warned Syrian forces to stay away from the south, rising anger is pushing residents to take up arms to defend themselves. On the anniversary of Assad's fall, Israel's diaspora minister Ahmed responded to videos of Syria's army chanting in solidarity with Gaza by saying war is inevitable. Whether the US can constrain its closest ally and force through a security agreement depends on President Trump's determination to see a strong Syria, something he's reiterated over several friendly meetings with the country's interim leader.
The US has been quite optimistic and very forward-leaning when it comes to its support. The Israelis, however, are very worried of the jihadist past, and they're also concerned about a strong central state in Syria potentially turning against them at some point.
If the support from the Trump administration holds, Shara's charm offensive may save Syria from another war. But whether photo ops can translate into long-term investment in the country's recovery is yet to be seen. If not, there is no shortage of actors at home and abroad ready to take advantage of the ensuing chaos.